Parish Board of Adjustment meeting Tuesday, August 6th is now called to order. Ms. Secretary, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Thomas, Mr. Guidry, Mr. Gordon.
Here.
Mr. Snyder.
Here.
Mr. Fendel.
Here.
Mr. Brookter.
Here.
Mr. Ballantyne.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Did everyone get a copy of the previous minutes from the July 2nd meeting? Do
I
we have,
make a motion to accept the minutes from our last meeting.
we have a motion to accept? All in favor?
We need a second. We need a second.
Do we have a second on that?
I'll second.
We have a second.
We need
All,
to vote.
all those, do we need to vote with the lights on that? Please vote with your lights.
Motion carries.
Okay. Our first case is BOA case number 2019-1526 BOA. Request by applicant in an A4 single-family residential zoning district to waive the required 25-foot yard no-cut buffer and the required 50-foot side and rear yard no-cut buffer to allow for the property to be developed as a hayfield. The property is located on the east side of Javery Road, Slidell, Louisiana. The applicant and representative is Clarence Lambert, Jr. The applicant is requesting to waive the required 25-foot front yard no-cut buffer and the required 50-foot side and rear yard no-cut buffer. Staff comments, please.
The applicant is seeking a waiver of the required no-cut buffers to allow for the property to be developed as a hayfield. Staff feels that there is no compelling reason to recommend approval of the requested variance, considering that no hardship has been demonstrated, and the following reasons. The site is currently zoned A4 single-family residential and does not allow for any agricultural uses. Although the use is not permitted, the required buffers would not prevent the site to be developed as a hayfield, and the preservation of the required 25-foot no-cut buffer along the road would allow to provide and maintain a natural screen between the uses taking place on the property and the residences located along the west side of Javery Road.
Is the applicant present?
Yes, sir.
Will you please come forward and state your name and address for the records, please?
Clarence Val Lambert Jr., 115 Boswell's Drive, Slidell, Louisiana, 70458.
Mr. Lambert, do you have anything further to add?
Yes, sir. I'm retired. Only thing I got coming in is my Social Security. Okay, I wanted to make some extra money for myself and my family. I also have 4.5 acres there. I understand if it was 3 acres, wouldn't have any buffer. Is that correct?
If it would be less than 3 acres.
Less than 3 acres, is that correct? Okay, so if I split it in two, like sell 2 1/4 to my wife or someone, then I wouldn't have to go through all this, is that correct? Is that correct?
Well, and I'm speaking for staff, but you may have to get a subdivision and subdivide the property
Okay,
into
I
2
didn't know that's what I'm
parcels.
asking.
Yeah, I think there's a procedure. Helen, can you comment on?
Yes, there's a procedure to go through.
There's a procedure where you can subdivide your property into 2 separate parcels. Yeah, it is.
Right, then I wouldn't have to worry about the buffers, because on the side of me is a retention pond, okay? And they're all the way up to my line. Behind me is my brother and sister. They own the 5 acres behind my property. And there's no buffer on it either. So all we talking about, why do I have to hit the buffer zone? I don't understand that. Can somebody give me a reason for that?
I'm going to let staff comment on that.
But the regulation states that the buffers are required because the property is over 3 acres.
It doesn't make sense.
But that may be true, Mr. Lambert, but we have to go by what the parish rules and regulations are at present. We do not make those rules. We have to just follow what the parish rules are. Now, it may make sense, may not make sense, but we have to
I
follow.
own my land.
I understand
I
that,
own
sir.
the trees on my land. I got a guy right down the street from me that's cutting trees off of his land without, I'm trying to do it the right way. Okay? He paid nothing. He's cutting it, getting rid of him himself. Okay. That's not here or there. I understand that. I know what the rules are. I understand all that. So if I go in there and start cutting trees on my own and hauling them off on my own, you can't touch me. Is that correct?
I can't answer that. I'm going to have to refer that to staff or legal on that. And Greg, I saw your light. I'm going to give you in a minute.
The regulation applies to the property owner as well
Okay.
as the contractor.
Okay, y'all have a great day.
Well, we're not, we hear some questions of it.
Do what?
I think we had some questions, unless you want to end this. I mean, we have some,
Okay, what kind of questions you got?
well, I don't know, have Mr. Gordon had a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Lambert, when did you buy your land?
It was given to me by my mother, who passed away. We've been here since
You
1962.
got to hit your mic button on it. Okay, wait just a second. All right, try it now, Greg.
Okay. Your land was given to you, was donated to you?
It was given to me by my mother, who passed away. I got it.
Okay. And your intentions are to clear it so that you can sell the timber?
Sell the timber, yes, sir.
And then you're going to make hay and sell hay?
That's correct,
And you
sir.
want to do all that in a residential zone? It's not allowed to do any of that?
Well, if that's the rule, that's the rule. I
Well,
guess I
it
can't
is-
do
It is
that.
zoned
Family dwelling,
A4 residential, so you can't do hay growing for sale. I guess you could,
can I grow it for myself? That's what I'm asking you. Can I grow it for myself? No?
then it would be maybe I don't know. I have no idea if you could grow it for yourself. What would you do with it? Just let it grow and then die?
No, I'll feed it to horses. I'll food with thoroughbreds, sir.
I don't know if you can, so you'd cut it for horses that you'd have somewhere else?
Right.
Okay.
That's why I say I just,
Yeah, this is on the policy. I don't care about that.
well, I understand that.
All right, this is a question for staff. Even if he were granted a variance or some sort of a variance, what about the growing of hay and selling it?
That's what I'm trying to pull I mean, if it's grown for commercial purposes, it's not permitted because there's no rural overlay, so agricultural uses are not permitted. I'm trying to pull the.
There's a lot of
zoning.
commercial in that area. Would it be a possibility to change the zoning on this property?
Well, you could ask for a rural overlay to allow for agricultural uses.
Oh, I don't think there is. What's across the street from you? Would be the your west side.
Across the street is some single dwelling
Oh, okay.
homes.
Yeah, it
Nothing that
appears,
would interfere with anybody.
it appears that a rural overlay would be required for any type of agricultural, cultivation of garden crops, farms, anything similar to that.
And that would be through the planning and zoning?
Zoning, yes.
Okay, so maybe if he went to planning and zoning and got a rural overlay and then came back and tried to get a variance, that might be a better procedure?
Well, if you would like to postpone his variance,
You want to try that one?
No, because all you're doing is digging in my pocket. It's gonna cost me to do that.
Okay,
Then I had no guarantee you're gonna give it to me anyway.
that's
Just
true.
like coming here. All right, thank y'all. I am.
All right, well, since the gentleman doesn't seem interested, I'll make a motion to deny.
I have a motion to deny the request. Do I have a second? Do we have any discussion from anyone?
Yeah, I mean, I have hay fever. I was against this from the start.
All right, since there's no discussion, would everyone please vote with their lights? And this is a motion to deny.
I don't have anything. There I am.
Do we have a mouse?
I just did it, but when I'm speaking, you should have a way for me to turn my mic off, and that wasn't up either.
Mr. Snyder?
I can't control, I had to vote first and before I can't get back to mic control.
No,
right
that was
now.
before, what I'm
Okay.
saying.
But you should have had we gotta check the attendance, make sure everybody's marked in as attendant.
I just voted in advance.
My partner voted against. Wait, that's 3-1. That doesn't
It's,
work.
no, yeah, yeah, I voted. I voted, it should have took my vote. Can you get back to the votes on this?
I guess we'll have to re-vote.
Yeah, why don't everybody, let's re-vote.
Motion passed.
Motion passes. Our next case is BOA case number 2019-1527 BOA. Request by applicant in a PF1 Public Facility Zoning District to reduce the required setbacks on the north side from 199 feet to 33.1 feet on the east side, and from 199 feet to 36.8 feet on the west side, from 199 feet to 30 feet on the south side, and from 199 feet to 30 feet, and for a waiver of the required planting area and the required number of Class C shrubs to allow the property to be developed as a cellular tower. The property is located on the west side of East First Street, Covington, Louisiana. The applicant is New Singular Wire, PCS LLC, John Layens Jr. The applicant is requesting to reduce the required setbacks on the north, south, east, and west sides of the property and to waive the required planning to allow for the placement of a cellular tower. Staff comments, please.
Although the attached statement indicates that in the event of a structural failure, the proposed tower would buckle and lean over on itself, resulting in a fall radius of less than 30 feet, staff is opposed to the requested setback variances for the following reasons. First, the parent parcel being 2.26 acre in size appears to be large enough so that the leased area could be expended in order to meet the parish setback requirements on all sides. Second, the tower could directly fall on any of the residences located on the east side of the street, since the closest residence is located 110 feet from the proposed tower. There are also health and safety concerns for the residents in the area and potential dangerous damages that could be caused to the adjacent residences if the tower was to fall. In regards to the requested waiver of the required planting area and the required number of Class C or shrubs, staff feels that there is no compelling reason to recommend approval of the requested variances, considering that the presence of existing residences directly across from the site and a living screen should be provided to create a buffer from the base of the tower and the ground equipment.
I see the applicant is present. Would you please state your name and address for the records, please?
Yes, sir. Chip Lyons, 201 St. Charles, New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, AT&T Wireless. And I want to give you just a little bit of background on the need for the cell tower at this location, and then I'll address the two variance requests that we've made. So as you know, so data coverage and usage has exploded throughout the country. There are more devices than people in the United States, and so what used to be a cell phone that was just used for making phone calls, emails, texts is now used for a home movie theater, home shopping, and schoolwork, and also for emergency use. So in this particular area, these are maps showing existing coverage. This is North Collins is what we refer to this location as. And the maps actually, the red on the maps means best coverage. That means you can get a signal in your house. If it's yellow, that means you can get a signal in your car, and if it's green, that means you can get a signal just outside. So in this area right now, there's a pretty significant coverage and capacity gap. If this site goes online, then the coverage gets much better, and people are able to get coverage from AT&T within their house, within their car. This particular location would also allow, AT&T would be at the top, there would be room for 2 additional carriers on the tower, so other carriers could come and locate. So cell coverage in-house is both sort of an expectation that people have now, and it's also essentially a public safety issue. More than half the houses in the country are wireless only. They don't even have a landline. Every day in the country, 80% of 911 calls are estimated to come from cell phones, and of those, over 50% are indoors. So the numbers are nationwide, over 500,000 calls a day come from cell phones. And so part of what the carriers are trying to do in order to beef up their coverage, and this is AT&T and all the carriers, is to provide better coverage and capacity to all their customers in the area. This tower also, in addition to having room for other carriers, would have room for AT&T's FirstNet service, which is a dedicated service for first responders that AT&T got a national contract to build. So this also would provide additional capacity for first responders on a separate network available just to them. With regard to on this site, what the carriers do when they're looking for a site is they have existing coverage that's shown, as shown on the map that I showed you. They identify an area where they need better coverage, better capacity. The engineers say, here's where you need to put something. They then have their land use people go out and try and, find a willing landowner, because the carriers can't just go, it's not like Clico or a power company where they can just go take someone's property. They have to get somebody to agree to lease the property to them. They also look at zoning, and so it's a question of finding the right location. It's almost kind of like Goldilocks. They can't be too close to other towers and can't be too far away. If they're too close, it interferes. If they're too far away, calls drop. So they try and find the right location. On this particular location, we found a willing landowner. The landowner wants us to be in the, so this is the landowner's property. The landowner said, I want you up in this portion. The landowner doesn't want us taking the entire property because he has other uses for the remainder of the property. And I'll get back to this one in a minute. So on this particular property, because of the zoning, we've been through a zoning map change to get it changed to the current zoning that went through parish planning and was approved by the parish council. With respect to the 2 variances we're looking for today, one is for the setback of the tower and the other is for landscaping. Landscaping, we don't really think the landscaping's necessary given the trees and other natural foliage around the site, but frankly, that one we can, I can withdraw that variance if it would help. We don't really need that variance. The height variance we absolutely need, or else we can't put the tower here. So the tower is a 190-foot monopole. The way that zoning codes in St. Tammany and a lot of other jurisdictions are drafted is that, as is the case here, the setback is often tied to the height of the tower. Over time, tower technology has changed so that if something happens to that tower, one, it's designed not to fail, but if it does, it doesn't come down like a tree. So if something happens to the tower, you don't have a 190-foot tower coming down. We have a letter from a structural engineer saying that if something happens to the tower, they're essentially designed with a structural fail point substantially higher on the tower. So if something happens, if there's a structural failure, which doesn't generally happen, the tower will just bend over like that, and it'll sort of have a 30-foot radius where it bends, but it's designed to bend and not break. So you're not going to have a 190-foot tower coming down. You have a 30-foot section of the tower that bends and just stays in that position instead of going back. So that's based on a letter from a structural engineer that designs the towers for AT&T. So in the present case, the fall radius would essentially just be the 30-foot bend. There are other structures on adjacent property, but the closest, these are kind of out structures. The closest residential structure we checked on, based on our calculations, the closest residential structure is over here, and that's about 270 feet away from the tower. So So the issue at hand is not, this is not just for the mere convenience of the applicant. Our location is dictated by our landowner. They want us up here. We think it's a good location because it is tucked away from adjacent uses. The tower, if it's going to have a 30-foot radius, is not going, a fall radius if something happens, is not going to affect adjacent properties over here. So for those reasons, we're asking for the setback variance. On the landscaping, we're not as concerned about that one. That's not one that we have to have. If we don't get the setback variance, we can't put the tower in this location. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, Mr. Ballantyne?
Number one, is my understanding that this type of monopole antenna is designed to fail within itself. And the actual 30 feet radius is if the thing would bend and maybe break, or the whole thing would come down within that 30 feet. You're suggesting it just kind of leans over and then stands there within the 30 feet.
Yeah, so my general experience on towers is that on the lattice work towers, which are the three-sided towers, those generally are designed to kind of collapse upon themselves. Monopole, all the engineering letters we've had through all the applications I've done, all indicate the same thing, which is that the tower bends over and doesn't collapse on itself.
All right. On the letter from Sabre Industries,
Yes.
in the second paragraph, it talks about a safety factor of 25%.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's kind of thin. What does that mean? So it's got the safety factor is only 25, so you've got a 75% chance you're in trouble.
Well, no, I think the tower is designed to meet whatever code requirements are out there. I believe that the safety factor is a buffer in addition to whatever the code requirements are. So they're not saying that they design it to 25% of the code. It has to meet the code, and then I believe that the 25% is an additional buffer on top of code requirements.
All right, hold up your picture there that shows it in the northeast corner. All right, First Street goes all the way down there just prior. Okay, let me make my point first. There's a house right across the street, and you said it was 250 feet away. It ain't 250 feet away. 250 feet, you'd be back down on 3rd Avenue.
Okay, I mean, again, I didn't have a surveyor go out there, but I just based on measurements on Google Earth, and I've got a smaller version of this, it shows that the house here, which again, these look to be, it was hard to tell, these look to be sheds or out structures. It looked at the house here
Did you
was
go
270
stand out on
feet.
First Street?
Excuse me?
Did you physically go out and stand on First Street?
No, I did not.
There's where the sign is, the St. Tammany Parish, there's a house within 30 feet.
Okay, I mean, so I looked as close as I could at the Google Earth shot. I did not go to the site. Again, I think based on the engineer's letter, and this is a fairly, I mean, you guys have to make a decision based on the facts that I presented. I would say that it's not an unusual.
What I'm saying is some of your facts are wrong.
Okay, well, I think that the facts are that we have an engineer's letter that says that this tower, if there's a structural issue, is going to bend, and it's going to have sort of a 30-foot radius to that distortion of the tower.
And there's a house. If I lived in that house, it's next to this little square you got, and I'd say, look, the engineer said it's going to fall within that 30. I couldn't get that past my wife. She wouldn't buy it.
You finished, Tom?
I'm done.
Mr. Gordon? Is your mic, you got a mic button at the, I don't know why yours is.
Mic off. I can speak louder.
Well, no, I'll get it on just a second. I don't know why you, go ahead now.
Testing.
It should automatically come on, I don't know why it's not.
The coverage map you showed us, is that just for AT&T, or does that include all the other carriers?
No, this is just for AT&T.
Okay, so the people in there may actually have Verizon or someone else and have coverage. So we're not going to die from a 911 call that didn't get through. There's a good chance there's coverage in that area. It's right, it's right in Covington. Right?
Right, I mean,
Okay.
it depends on what carrier they're
Is this
with.
going to be a 5G tower?
This, at first, I don't have the answer to that. I'm not exactly sure if
But
it's
that's
gonna
the
be 5G
direction
or not.
everybody's headed, right?
That is the direction they're going in,
Okay.
correct.
Is there a contract with Sabre Industries right now with your company? They're the only people that manufacture your monopoles?
I do not know if they're the only ones that manufacture the monopoles. I do know that well, can I answer the, I know that the tower, the tower builder works with these guys pretty regularly, so they
Well,
have
the
a
reason
lot
I'm
of
asking is
experience in
because at the
area.
end of the last paragraph, it says, please note, this letter only applies to the above referenced monopole design.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
what they've engineered as stamped, just this pole.
That's right.
Okay, so if
Yeah.
you don't get this pole, we could have other issues, right?
I'm not sure that I'm following. You mean if we get the poll from somebody else?
If you get a different pole, this
Well,
only applies to this
yeah.
design.
Well, no, but, okay, so, yeah, the tower the company that constructs the tower contracts with Sabre Industries to do their tower construction, so we could certainly stipulate that if you guys are amenable to approving the setback waiver, that we would in fact get this particular tower from, and have it designed by this engineering company. We're not trying to,
Sure.
I'm not trying to kind of come in and have them describe a different tower from what we're going.
Right, well, that's why I asked if y'all had a contract with this company to kind of lock in these particular designs.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so let me just highlight a couple verbiage in this engineered letter.
Sure.
Most likely, assuming, likely to, highly unlikely. Those are all open-ended responses. If some things happen exactly a certain way, it's going to do a certain thing. This isn't a guarantee on anything. This is most likely, maybe, probably, should. We design them like this. If everything just right, it's going to do certain things. That's why that verbiage is in there. Why? What else does this gentleman want to do with the property? Do you know?
I don't know. It looks like there is some agricultural use going on the property, and the lease gets, the lease was negotiated, and based on the site acquisition, contractor meets with the landowner, and presumably from AT&T's perspective, it would have been, it probably would have been easier to go, it's frankly, it's a balancing act, because the company is trying to find a location that is sort of, that the landowner's amenable to, that's as far away from other uses as possible, and this is the corner where they ended up, and that's a fairly common occurrence, is that a landowner doesn't want a tower in the middle of the property because it takes away from their, okay, I mean, it looks like it's,
Yeah, he's got it mowed in kind of a, I understand what you're saying, what
Yeah.
you're looking at.
So again, I would say, generally when we're going on a larger piece of property, the landowner usually requests that the tower be stuck, essentially in some corner of the property or the back of the property, so it doesn't take up, the landowner can continue to use the remainder of the property.
So would the landowner be amicable to signing off that no structures would ever be built in his property as long as the tower was there? Because that's what we're dealing with, a tower that could hit somebody else.
So on this property, I would have to look at the lease to see what the landowner can or can't do, because essentially we have an access area and then
Right.
we have the tower location. So certainly there are restrictions in the lease against him doing anything on his property that would interfere with the use and operation of the tower.
Here's my problem. If he's doing agricultural,
Yeah.
it wouldn't matter where you put the tower, he could do it all around it. There's something else that he wants to do with that land, and it probably involves residential, because it's right by Covington.
It could be, correct.
And then now we're sticking a tower up next to, we saying that there are no homes in the immediate vicinity, even though there may be. There might be one right next door, and that could be an issue.
I guess I understand what you're saying, but I
Right.
still think going back to the engineer's letter, you've got an engineer who's saying that if there's an issue with the tower, it bends over at the top 30 feet, it doesn't come down. And from the homeowner's perspective, the reason, I mean, and this is an issue that the carriers deal with a lot, the reason they're trying to put towers in the vicinity of residential areas is that's where the demand is.
Sure.
That's who they're trying to get the service to, and it's literally impossible for them to put a tower in an area where there are no residences because one, there's no demand there. That's not where they need the service. So this is an issue they come up with, that they deal with frequently, and that's, and that's why they go to engineers and get the design letters to indicate that in this situation, the tower is not going to come down on adjacent residences.
Yeah, this engineer's letter was extremely weak. A good engineer's letter would have said, there's no way in heck that this tower can do anything but collapse upon itself.
Now, part of, and,
That kind of, wait a minute, now,
Yes, sir.
I listened, I was patient. We've granted variances for towers before based on the fall, but we were very specific on the residents that were around them. And they weren't. For the most part, we try to maintain a good distance, and we don't have that, and we have a piece of land that potentially could develop and put residents immediately next to the tower. You talk about web towers that fall. How do web towers fall?
they're designed to fall essentially onto
themselves?
Correct.
Where are you from?
I'm from New Orleans.
Remember the Louisiana State Troopers Tower on West End and the interstate?
Mm-hmm.
Where'd it go?
I don't know.
Oh, yeah, it went across West End Boulevard and laid down flat during Katrina. So these things are an issue. We have good engineers, but when they leave it open-ended verbiage, I have a little bit of a problem.
Mr. Snyder? Is your mic on? Let me get to it just a second. I don't know why these mics ain't coming on.
There we go. Yes. Mr. Layens, you mentioned earlier about the relative distance between two towers. I assume there's some perfect distance or optimal distance. And if there is, then what is the min and max off of that would be also considered acceptable in feet or yards or anything else?
Right. So I can give you a general answer. I can't give you a specific answer on this tower. And the general answer is that when the network engineers say they need a new location, they generally give the land acquisition team a search radius that's usually about a 0.2 mile radius, 0.2 to quarter mile radius, pretty small radius. And they say, from an engineering perspective, this would be the most optimal location. Now, the land acquisition people can't always find something within that search ring, so they try and get as close to it as they can. And once they've found a potential location, they then go back to the engineers and say, here's what we found. Does this work or does it not? And the engineers tell them, on this particular location, I'm not, I don't have the information with me as to whether this is precisely in the search ring or near it.
Right. Well, you say a 0.2 mile radius, so that's a little over 1,000 feet. And it just seems like if you could move 90 feet to the southwest and renegotiate the lease, you'd be good to go.
Right.
So, I mean, there is land available there. It's obviously the owner's discretion, but you're saying the engineers say 1,000 feet, 0.2 miles, a little over 1,000 feet.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of factors that go into it. You've got the engineer's location, you've got what the owner says, and then from a zoning perspective, and this is kind of an unfortunate part of the process, is that there's probably a 6 to 12 month process that the company goes through before they even get to zoning, because they have to get FCC approval, they have to do a study under the National Environmental Policy Act. There's a lot of due diligence they do to make sure the site works before they get to zoning. Once they've gone through that and gotten FCC approval for this particular location, they have some leeway in terms of how far to move the tower. My experience has been that leeway is probably, within within the 50-foot range. If they're moving it 100 or 150 feet or 200 feet, a lot of times from a regulatory perspective, that means they have to start over. So, so in this situation, if even if the landowner said, yeah, you can go down here, that doesn't necessarily mean that that AT&T would come back and do that, because they may have to start over. I don't have a specific answer on that or direction from them, but that's been my experience on prior sites.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Ballantyne?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion for a number of reasons, too many to enumerate and go over. All the staff has a number of reasons to not to approve this, and I make a motion to deny the request based on the proximity to the housing and specifically the safety issues.
We got a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion?
Yeah, I do.
Go back to the other screen, please. Just a second, Greg. All right, Mr. Gordon?
Yeah, I'm not in favor of this, but if you were to go back to the landowner, let me back up a second. You can't tell me that if there happened to be a house on that corner, that AT&T would have said, nope, we can't go to the other corner of the property because we're too far out of range and we're just not going to put a tower up. So that's just not logical. They put towers everywhere.
No, yeah.
So this is what I'm saying
sure.
is, I'm against this right now, but if you were to go back and either get with the owner or consider moving it to a different location on the property, I mean, I'm not against these poles, I'm just against this particular
Okay,
location.
no, I understand.
Would it be possible to move the tower where the proposed equipment is?
No, excuse me. We on open discussion. We do have a motion on the floor, that is correct. Now, you can call for a vote, but we on open discussion. And if you want to cease the discussion and call for a vote, we can vote if you want to call for a vote. But right now, we're on open discussion. But if you want to call for a vote, then we can vote on if we're going to proceed to the voting.
I call for a vote.
Actually, it's a point of order, it's called for a question,
Yeah,
but okay.
yeah, okay, I think we need a second on that, too. To call for the question. Okay, we have a motion on the floor to call the question. Do I have a second? Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second to call for the vote. Ms. Secretary, this vote, just so everybody understands, we're just voting, do we proceed to the actually voting on the motion? Ms. Secretary, would you put on everyone's voting lights? Just so everybody understands, if you vote yes, that means this discussion's over and we have to go into the vote. If you vote nay, that means we can still discuss this among everyone. I just want to make sure everybody understands that. Okay, everyone sees the light, please vote with your lights. Motion fails, so we're still in open discussion. Okay, I'm sorry, Helen. Let me see if I get you a mic control. This thing's not working. I got you on. Go ahead.
Is it possible to move the tower where the equipment is and move the equipment further to the front of the property? So I think it would make it further back and it might meet the setback.
I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure what area you're talking about, so I guess,
Within the same area that you had rezoned. And if you look at the drawing that you submitted,
so move the tower to closer to where the equipment cabinet is for the carriers?
flip-flop it. So put the tower where the equipment would be and move the equipment to the front. So then it would be a little further back.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry, let me just get to the survey. So if we're moving, so I'm looking at survey that shows the lease compound, which is, so you're essentially suggesting that we keep the tower within the existing lease compound and just move it further, I guess, toward
West.
I'm looking for my arrow
West.
direction. Further west? Okay.
Is that an option?
I mean, yeah, if we're in the existing lease area, that could be an option, and they could reconfigure the equipment cabinets, because I think within the existing lease area, they probably have more leeway than if they had to take it and move the whole footprint elsewhere on the property.
Helen, I got a question on just what you just got. If they move that tower to the west or the east, wherever, wouldn't they have to expand the area for the fall radius to go further to the
No.
east or west?
Well, what they could do is, if you look at the drawing here, they would move the tower where the equipment is, so closer to that lease area line, and then move the equipment in the front.
Yes, but but if you put the tower right here, wouldn't you have to extend this line for the fall radius?
No, they would just amend, they would have to, I guess they would, the variance would be larger on this side than in the front.
But let me get something. This zoning, is this for this piece of property, or is for the whole piece of property, the PF1?
It's just for that area.
So the rest of the zoning is residential?
Yes.
But I just want to get this straight in my mind. If you move that tower to where the equipment is, and the boundaries stay the same, wouldn't you have to move, I see we have some other questions. Wouldn't you have to move that boundary, so if they ever develop that in residential, they can't bump right up to it? They would have to be at least 30, 50 feet or 100 feet away from where that new tower would be.
Well, you would have to request a variance to be at almost zero with the setback from the property line.
I personally wouldn't feel comfortable with a zero setback without having the final 30 feet. I mean, I just saying, speaking for myself, if we're gonna, protect someone, we need to have at least the 30+ feet.
But it doesn't mean that this is, I'm just suggesting this.
I understand. I'm just asking just so I have it clear in my mind. But I have some people online, and everybody be recognized. And I'll just go down the list. Mr. Gordon, you're next, then Mr. Brook, then Mr. Ballantyne, then Mr. Snyder. So that's the order I have. Let me get to my mic control. Mr. Gordon?
This is for staff. I mean, under your comments, it says the closest residence is 110 feet. So if this lot is only 55 feet wide or 60 feet wide, and they shove the tower all the way in the bitter corner, they're still only 170 feet from the residence.
That's correct. It's not ideal. I'm
Okay.
not saying that this is the
I just
ideal
wanted to
situation.
confirm that.
Right.
Mr. Brookton?
John, is it possible to go back and renegotiate with the owner about some additional properties there?
It's always possible to go back to the landowner. I guess what I don't know from the company's perspective, is the landowner willing to do that? Is the company willing to do that? And I think Ms. Lambert alluded to it earlier, and a point that I hadn't brought up is that we got this corner of the property rezoned to allow for the tower, so if we were to move it to a different portion of the property, we'd also have to go through the rezoning process with that portion of the property, because in order to allow a tower as a permitted use. So it's possible. I don't have information really on whether that would be likely or not.
You finished, Mr. Brookton?
Yes.
Mr. Ballantyne?
On this drawing where it says the end of the asphalt, and it shows 30 feet and 30 feet, there's a house right next to the asphalt. And it ain't 100 feet. And there's a house right where the word asphalt is. I mean, it's right at the end of the asphalt. And you go another 15 or 20 feet, there's another house and another house and another house coming down First Street.
Well, I measured basically from the center of the square all the way up to the front of the property of the house. From the base of the tower all the way up to the house.
I didn't measure it. I just stood there and looked at it.
Are you finished, Mr. Valentine?
I'm done.
I have a question of staff. They went before planning and zoning to get this zoned as a PF1. Did they have what they were gonna do with it, and did planning and zoning look at this and what they was gonna put on it and see how it's located and the tower size and so forth? Or that wasn't a part of just getting a PF1 without and I don't know, I'm not a part of the P and Z, so I just got a question on that.
What Mr. Lyons was there at the meeting. He stated to the zoning commission that the purpose of the zoning change was to place a tower. However, there's no, documents provided as to how tall the tower is gonna be or where it's gonna fall or anything like that. It's not required.
But that was, if I could just, that was in our initial application.
Yep.
All the material that I've presented to this board, I believe, was in our initial application when we went for the zoning.
So you saying the planning and zoning saw that?
Well, I don't know. I can't testify as to what the commissioners reviewed. I know that we provided that information up front.
I'm just curious,
Yeah.
just from my own thing, because you say you're gonna put a tower, but they may be thinking a 30-foot tower, and all of a sudden you put a 200-foot tower. You're talking about two different, I don't know, I'm just asking just for my own information.
When a zoning change is requested, we don't add any additional, documents to the file. Basically, the petitioner or the owner is allowed to state the reason for the request. However, we're not to provide, drawings with the application form for the zoning change.
So if you get a PF1 and you can put a tower, then you still got other requirements you have to meet within that area.
Absolutely.
So you can't come in and put a 400-foot tower on this piece of property, wouldn't?
That's correct.
Okay. That was just for my own. Mr. Ballantyne, I see you have a question again?
No, I have a motion and a second. And asking if we could move along and vote.
You do have a motion on the floor, we do have a second on the floor, which was, if I'm not mistaken, to
Deny the request.
Deny the request. We was in open discussion, and we were still in open discussion. You was asking about that particular motion. Yes, that is a motion that's, my mic's not. Yes, we do have that motion still on the floor. I just wanted to make sure that there's no other discussion or questions concerning this. Do we have any other questions of the applicant, Mr. Lyons? At this time, we do have a motion and a second. Would everyone please vote with their lights, please? Oh,
Yeah, we should have read the motion.
yeah, I think we got messed up on the lights. Let's re-vote on this thing. I think we voted the wrong way. The motion is to deny.
Motion passed.
All right. Thank you for your time.
Our next case is BOA case number 2019-1532 BOA. Request by applicant in an A4 single-family residential zoning district to reduce the required front yard setback from 25 feet to 15 feet to allow for the construction of a single-family residence on the property. The property is located at 255 Clara Drive, Slidell, Louisiana. The applicant and representative is Wilhelm and Renee Schober, I guess?
Schober.
Schober, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
The applicant is requesting to reduce the required front yard to allow for the construction of a single-family residence. Staff comments, please.
The applicant is seeking to reduce the front yard setback from 25 feet to 15 feet to allow for the construction of a 1,540 square feet single-family residence. Staff feel that there's no compelling reason to recommend approval of the requested variance. Although the property is only 65 feet in depth, meeting the front setback requirements of 25 feet will not prevent the construction of a single-family residence on the site.
Would you please state your name and address for the records, please?
Yeah, Wilhelm Schober, 32 Kane Drive, LaPlace, Louisiana.
Mr. Schober, do you have anything further to add?
Yes, I do. The typical setback on existing homes in this neighborhood is 15 feet. All of the homes on Clara Drive, Evella, and Jacqueline are built with a 15-foot setback. The 65-foot depth on the lot, about 15 feet of that is over water on the canal. So it's not buildable on the house. So that's why we're asking for the adjustment to a 15-foot setback instead of 25.
Anything further, Mr. Schober?
I mean, that's pretty much it.
Okay.
If we built a house with a 25-foot setback, the back wall of the house would be practically sitting on the bulkhead.
All right.
And this is pretty much in line with all the other homes in the neighborhood.
Okay, Mr. Gordon?
Yeah, we've gotten several of these in the subdivision. We're familiar with it. We always pass and approve the variance, and I make a motion to approve this one.
We got a motion to approve in a second. Do we have any discussion? Mr. Ballantyne, so you had your light on. I don't know if you want any discussion. Okay, Mr. Ballantyne? Just a second, let me get your mic on. This thing is not working automatically.
All right.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm opposed to this. And if you look at the aerial photo, all the houses, their rear wall is on the bulkhead or sticking out over the water. And, you know, it's not true that all of them are 15-foot setback. Look at the dotted line, which I guess is, I don't know what it is, but anyway, it would stick out way past the line of the front of the houses of all the other houses. I mean, it would stick out like a
I would have to disagree with
sore
that.
thumb. You know, and, you know, just because we've approved it in the past, you know, we made a mistake in the past, doesn't mean we have to make a mistake again.
You referred to this drawing. Who provided this particular drawing, Helen?
This is from our aerial, the parish aerial.
That's in your parish area?
Yeah.
And this box would be the 15 feet, or that'd be the normal setback? It shows these dotted lines. I'm curious, who put this dotted box on here?
This is the location of the property itself.
Okay.
That's plotted with meets and bounds.
All right.
What is it again, Ellen?
This is the location of the property itself, and it's plotted with the meets and bounds, like the degrees and the minutes and the.
Okay. Mr. Snyder, just a second, get your mic on, okay?
Yeah, quick question for staff. If this gentleman were to decide to remove a 24-inch live oak tree, would he need any kind of permit?
No,
Not where he's located?
no.
Okay. Well, I still support the variance.
Let me get your mic on, Mr. Gordon, again. I'm going to do this manually each time. Go ahead, Mr. Gordon.
Helen, did you just say that dotted, that perforated line shows the property line, not the setback?
The property line, yes.
Not the setback. So the
Correct.
setback is going to be back in line with the other houses on the street. And if you would refer to this picture in your packet, you'll notice that everything is very consistent in there. I've spent a lot of time in this subdivision. We've done numerous ones, and they weren't mistakes. We've done probably 6 or 8.
Just a second. Who furnished these pictures? Did you these?
That's my pictures.
Is this in relationship to your lot where these,
That is the house directly next door.
that's the
To
house
the east of
directly?
my house. Yes,
And
sir.
then this picture here?
That is looking from my lot across the street, looking west.
So your lot's on this side of the street?
Yes, sir.
So this is on the other, opposite
That's
side?
on the
of-
opposite side, yes,
And
sir.
then this is looking from your lot down?
From my lot, looking toward the east.
Looking towards the interstate,
Yes, sir, toward the end of the street.
to the end of the street?
Yes, sir.
I just want to get clarification for me. Mr. Ballantyne, just a second, let me get your mics on, because this thing's, all right, Mr. Ballantyne?
On these pictures, and with the setback you're requesting, the front of your house will line up with
Yes,
these
sir.
other front of these other houses?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, is there any more discussion? We have a motion on the floor, and I think we had a second, and that was to approve. To approve, correct? We have- To approve. We're hearing no more discussion or questions. Would everyone please vote with their lights? Motion passes. Motion passes.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Our next case is BOA case number 2019-1545-BOA, request for applicant in an HC2 highway commercial zoning district to allow for the reduction of the required number of parking spaces to allow for the construction of a 5,400 square foot commercial building on the property. The property is located at 2316 Gauze Boulevard East, Slidell, Louisiana. The applicant is Gary Dragon. The applicant is requesting to reduce the number of parking spaces to allow for the construction of a commercial building. Staff comments, please.
Since additional information has been provided regarding the proposed uses of the commercial building, which is proposed to be developed with a physical therapy clinic and a retail space, and the square footage of each uses has been provided, the requested reduction of the number of parking spaces has been changed from 19 required spaces to 18 spaces. I indicated here the way we calculate the required number of parking spaces. So according to the calculation, the physical therapy clinic is required to provide 15 spaces and the retail space, minimum of 4 spaces. Staff is not in favor of the request, considering that no hardship or practical difficulty is being demonstrated and the size of the building could be reduced to meet the minimum required number of parking spaces.
Before you start, I understand we may have some people opposed to this. Can I see a show of hands if anybody's here to oppose it? Okay, I'm going to give everybody ample time. Just wanted to make sure of that. Yes, would you please state your name and address for the records, please?
Gary and Melissa Dragon, and our home address is 111 Turtle Creek Boulevard, Slidell, Louisiana, 70461.
Do you have anything further to add to what you've heard?
Yes, sir. Again, we're asking to allow for 18 parking spaces instead of required 19 parking spaces of a medical clinic. I'm not a physician. I'm not a doctor. I'm a physical therapist. We don't schedule patients like a traditional doctor does, many people per hour. The majority of our physical therapy codes that we use are one-on-one codes, which only allows us to see 1 to 2 people per hour per therapist. So we need space because we need to have equipment. We treat neck pain, back pain, shoulder pain, hip pain. So we need equipment for all of that. We need parallel bars for gait training. We need space to allow patients to walk around for gait training. So we need space inside the facility, not for people, but to hold all the equipment that we need. To decrease the size of the building would prevent us from having the rental space that we're looking for. We're looking at this as investment property as well, and we're counting on the rental space to help offset some of the costs with the clinic, or with the property. So please, don't let us miss out on this opportunity for one parking space that we're not going to need.
Okay. So we have some questions, and just give me a second to get your mic on. Mr. Gordon, Go, your mic's on now.
If you, well, hold on a second. Do you want to hear from the folks that are against it before I speak?
It's strictly, if you have any, we can hear the opposition. It's up to, we can hear the opposition.
Is there going to be a difference in the footprint on either of your proposals? In other words, smaller building, more parking, bigger building, less parking, is the footprint the same?
Wait, excuse me, sir. Excuse me. If you want to address it, please come forward and just state your name and address for the record. I don't mind you speaking, but please state your name and address.
I'm sorry, my name is Sean Burks. I'm with JV Burks and Associates. The parking footprint, site plan footprint would stay the same.
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
The parking layout, pond layout, all that would stay the same.
Well, not if he has less parking and bigger buildings. Something's going to, the overall footprint of concrete, is it going to be the same with either proposal, or one be less or one be more?
The building would have to be adjusted.
Right, so but I mean, with the building comes landscaping and whatnot. So I'm just asking, parking is just, there's not as much extra green space when you do parking lot.
The site is the last remaining parcel on Gauze.
I know the site.
So the site is it's maxed out. You know, as far as what's maxed the site out are the landscape buffers around the site, and then what can be fit is the building and the parking.
So no matter what happens, the footprint of the entire project is basically going to be exactly identical.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to give, unless you have anything further there, I'm going to give the opposition a chance to speak, and then I'll bring you back up with a counter.
Okay.
If someone wants to speak against this project or this variance, and please state your name and address for the records, please.
My name is Charles LaMarche. My address is 121 Herwig Bluff Road, Slidell, Louisiana, 70461.
And I'm sorry, say your name again. I didn't catch your last name.
LaMarche.
LaMarche. Okay.
LaMarche.
All right, Mr.
Yes, sir. I'm going to be brief. I'm here representing the folks that wrote the letter to you all. I'm sure that you all still have a copy of that letter from Mr. McAllister and Mr. Adams, so you have that letter from them. So I'm here representing them. The reason I'm here is I was the HOA president at the time this project started. I had to step down as the president of the HOA because I'm now running for District 9 councilman seat over here. So it was a conflict of interest. So I'm not the president right now. I just want to make sure that you're clear on that. I'm not the president. I was at the time this started. So that's what I'm here. That's why I'm representing the residents. I want to see this through. That's why I'm here. I'm simply here today in support of the residents. I want to ask you to deny this variance request. We need this developer, Mr. Burks, to work with us to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. There are serious, long-standing drainage problems and parking shortages in this area location already. And I know Mr. Gordon is very well aware of what is and what isn't over there, because he's been over there several times. These residents who have lived here for years and decades deserve better than being excluded with none of their input being taken into account by this developer. I simply ask this question: has the developer taken any steps or reached out to any of the surrounding neighbors to ask their input? Their problems have already gotten worse since the trees were taken down carelessly without perimeter screening for the first variance. There's no vegetation on this property at all. It's all been stripped completely. No trees, no vegetation at all. Does the developer not realize and understand the hardship he's placed on his neighbors this summer? We are not opposed to any development per se, but it needs to be done in a smart and sharing manner. Again, I'm here today in support of the residents of the Cross Gates subdivision, and I ask this Board of Adjustments to do the right thing and to deny this variance at this time. Thank you. I also understand the staff from the parish also is against this as well. I brought some pictures that I have copies at home. I was going to give you all to show you the major issues that this area has had for a very, very long time. And it's not going to get better if the developer doesn't take into account putting the footprint he's planning on putting on this property by putting this building and parking lot in a very small, tight area where you have concrete over here, you have concrete behind them, you have concrete next door. It's pretty much going to be a concrete jungle. And over there, they have a major drainage problem. And the parish has not resolved it to this day. Okay? I have pictures from several years ago from the Slidell Independent showing you how deep the water can get, almost up to the mailboxes when we have a really bad storm. And I recently was there July 14th in the dentist office, which sits in the property right behind where this building is going to go up. And you'll see that the parking lot is completely full of water. The dentist has to cancel his appointments a lot of times because he can't get in his driveway because his parking lot's full of water. Mr. McAllister, who lives right behind the dentist office, which is where this fence is right here, all this water goes into his backyard, so he ends up with a swimming pool and a pond most of the time, so his children can never play in the backyard if it rains, ever. Our concern is, did the developer take into consideration by placing this large footprint in this small space what the water was going to do? Have we had any hydrology reports, any engineers from the St. Tammany Parish government over there to see what's going to happen with this water that we already have a problem with? That's what we're concerned about. We've got a large building and a large parking lot go into a small space. And I have a picture of the cul-de-sac, which is right behind where this project is going to be, Quill Court, which is the address of the two gentlemen that wrote you the letter. This was on Mother's Day. These folks have a difficult time leaving their house on just a day it rains. Just imagine if we have a bad storm and all that water from all that concrete from all of those parking lots spill into that court. They'll never be able to get out. And lastly, this is a drainage pipe that the parish put in years ago, thinking this would help, and it does nothing. If you take a look at this closely, you'll see that they put a perforated plastic pipe with 2 bags of cement and let the cement get wet, and then took the wrapping around the cement and just took it off and left the 2 bags sitting on top of the pipe. And that was their answer to letting that parking lot drain into the sewage system. It doesn't work. And you'll see the pictures where the parking lots are full of water. Do you want me to pass the pictures up to you all?
Hey, anybody want to look at the pictures? Yeah, no, you don't. I have a lot of people want to speak, or I guess they want to ask you questions, Mr. Last. The only, I understand about the drainage, but this board, which before us, is parking spaces only. We're not addressing drainage. There was I'm assuming when P&Z, they have to give a drainage plan to the permit office before they can do it. So we cannot really, we're not looking at drainage. All we're looking to allow, and we take that in consideration, how it affects everything.
Right, and I'm not asking you to address the drainage on it. My concern is that the footprint is going to be so large that the vegetation and the greenage that's supposed to be around it, if you give them this variance, I mean, you're going to have very, very small spot to be putting any shrubbery that will actually be able to absorb the water. That's my concern, and our concern, you know, about where this building is going and how big it is and how it's going to fit that property, that the greenage, if we go with the variance that they're asking for, is still not going to allow much vegetation to be able to absorb the water.
Okay. I'm only looking at what I have in my packet. In my packet, I see a retention pond up in the front that they're putting in. As far as their green space, I have to go by the parishes making them keep so many trees and so much green space. But we're not looking at that today. So we have some people have some questions of you. First of all, Mr. Ballantyne, but give me a second to get the mics on again. Go ahead, Mr. Ballantyne, use first. Your mic should be on now. Is it? No. He hit you. Is there a mic button at the bottom?
No.
Something is
You can hear me?
Well, let me hit it again. Your mic should be on, right? I don't understand the system right now, but just speak loud, Tom, so it gets recorded.
My problem is I'm confused. You tried to clear it up there. I understood it was a parking space issue, but now we got a drainage issue, and Reagan's not here, but I read somewhere there were plantings, or they referred to plantings, is there a landscape plan that would go into this also? I mean,
The landscaping, we're not here to discuss the landscaping. They've provided the required landscape plan.
so they've got, Reagan's got an approved landscape plan,
Yeah, the landscaping's been reviewed.
okay? So all right, I'm done.
I would I didn't give you the floor, so you should have it now. Go. I'm sorry, that was my mistake. I went to the mic first and that. All right, just a second. Mr. Gordon, you be next, but give me a second to get your mic on. All right.
Mr. Lamarche,
Yes, sir.
the reason I asked Mr. Burke ahead of time on this before you spoke.
Yes, sir.
About the footprint is exactly the reason you're bringing it up. You don't want the footprint, but the footprint's not going to change. That's my understanding.
Right,
So,
and that's what I'm being told, sir. Yeah, I apologize.
so
We're just concerned, Mr. Gordon, that nothing's going to change.
okay, but I mean,
From this variance to this variance, it's not going to change.
right, and don't take this the wrong way.
Yes, sir.
But when they started developing cross gates, it was the same situation, was it not? As the different phases of cross gates, one flooded, I'm sure the neighbors on the other side of you all weren't happy that Waverly went in because of the same situation. Drainage goes to the street, to subsurface, in and out. It's not supposed to go to a vacant lot at any time. The vacant lot's supposed to do the same thing, subsurface to the street. Now, this is a commercial site that's required to have retention ponds. Hydrology reports, all of that had to have been done to come up with the retention pond so that there's no net increase in runoff of this site. He can only deal with this site. He can't deal with the rest of the subdivision, unfortunately. If we do or don't approve this, it's not going to affect the amount of concrete that sits on that particular site because of the parking spaces and the building. The footprint doesn't change. I don't know how we can make you happy today in any way we do it. But I'm listening.
I understand. Like I said, their biggest concern is that we're trying to put a very large facility, and we have nothing, remember, we have nothing against economic development. We appreciate the fact that we have small business people out there. This country runs on small businesses. We have nothing against Mr. Dragon. We just want people to really think smartly on how this is going to happen. That's all. Because there's been a major issue there for a long time.
Sure. We don't control the zoning. We don't control, I mean, the setbacks are established. We could give them less setback through a variance, but what he's building, what he's proposing, not in this variance, but straight up on the property, is perfectly legal and allowed in the parish, what he wants to do on this site. There's strict landscaping plans on, that's an overlay, it's a corridor overlay, I think, on landscaping, and it's pretty, you know, they want to see more trees, and they don't want to see the building, put trees everywhere.
Right, well, they lost the buffer between that building and the residents behind
Well,
it
sure, but it's
when
going
they
to do
took
that
everything
anyway.
down.
Once you put the building up, all that's going to die when they bring the dirt in. They have to plant the new trees in. But you know and I know, when it rains 5, 6, and 10 inches of rain, shrubbery and trees aren't doing anything to
understand that.
4 feet of water sitting in your street.
But you can see that a regular rainstorm we have a concern about it. That's all.
I understand
And
that, but
that property at one time, before it was developed, where the fill has gone into it, was acting as a natural retention pond because it was in this way, and now it's built up. Now
right,
the
but
water's going this way.
it had no desire to be, it had no right to be used as a retention pond in the first place. That's not what it is. I understand, once you build out, the guy with the lone lot, he's got everything that's coming to him. I mean,
Right.
that's just the nature of the beast. But the footprint is not going to change no matter what we do today. Same amount of concrete, same amount of runoff, same amount of everything, whether we approve it or we deny it.
Anything else, Mr. Gordon? Listen, Mr. Snyder, just let me get your mic on. Go ahead, Mr. Snyder.
Yes, so for staff, if the physical therapy clinic is reduced by 200 square feet, then they wouldn't need any variance, is that correct? That's one parking space, according to staff comments.
Yes.
So that's what we're dealing with. the footprint of
Yeah,
the building.
however they reduce the size of the physical therapy or the size of the retail space, it's one space that has
Well,
to be.
the bulk of the space is dedicated to the physical therapy, very little to the retail space. Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that so that we all understand if the building were reduced by 200 feet in the physical therapy area, they would not need a variance. Thank you.
Is that correct, Ellen?
Yeah, it's one space per 200
So
square feet.
200 feet. But he may not have to go the whole 200 feet if he's close. If he's over, it could be 180 feet he has to reduce it, depending on where
Potentially.
the figures worked out to be. Okay, just a second. Is there any other questions of Mr. Lemass? I have a question for Mr. Burks then.
Thank you.
And I'll let you, first of all, before we give you a question, if you have anything to rebuttal, I'll let you speak on rebuttal first. But then I do have a question.
I guess I'll, as far as the parking lot is concerned, well, first of all, let me kind of clarify, I'm not the developer for the site, I'm just the engineer. Mr. Dragon, this is his site, so just to kind of clarify what my role is. As far as this piece of property, the site is kind of, we had come here before this several months ago with regard to the landscape, and the reason why we had to clear the outside edge of the property had to do with the fact the site was so low. Mr. Gordon had just mentioned that just a minute ago. So when we have to raise the site up so that it does not hold water, whatever trees that were on the site were all going to be killed. So that was part of the decision-making process this board went through, as well as Regan did whenever they recommended the approval. So anyway, as far as the drainage concern, we are well aware that there is drainage and there's issues with rear properties that abut up to cross gates. This property does not butt up to cross gates. It actually butts up to a parking lot that they back up to cross gates. So we're kind of in the front. Our property does not drain to the rear. It actually will all drain to front to Gauls Boulevard. So whatever water it falls on our property, gets into our system, goes into the retention pond and drains out. This has nothing to do with the parking variance, but this just has to do with the overall site. We have been in touch with parish folks trying to determine ownership of servitudes. We've assisted with copies of old surveys that we've had from back in the 1990s to try to help out with regard to that. Once again, that has to do with Mr. LaMarche, and it has to do with the drainage along the rear of cross gates back up over there. So we have been in touch with Public Works and the right-of-way folks so they can figure those things out. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
But did you do the engineering study for the water, for the retention pond?
Yes, yes.
Let me just ask the question, and just from my own knowledge. Is it a possibility of putting subsurface culverts in your parking lot where you retain the water first before it gets to the,
We do have subsurface culverts that we capture the drainage. We have lining the perimeter of the property, and we have them coming up the sides and then going into the pond. So we do have subsurface going around the site.
so you collecting water there also before it goes?
We are collecting water in the subsurface, and some of our water storage that we have is the pond, and some of it's actually in the pipes as well, too.
Okay, I didn't know if you had that, okay.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Gordon, let me get your mic on again. All right, Mr. Gordon.
Yeah, my concern actually isn't so much on the physical therapy part, it's on the retail part as far as parking goes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a standard, there's a minimum, but you could have twice that many people in there for retail parking. You may have a little store with one employee, you may have a little store there with 3 employees and 5 people are there at one time. Now you've taken up 8 parking spots for this one single retail spot.
Well, what I want next to me is like a single office professional, whether it's like a CPA with a CPA and a secretary, and they see 1 or 2 people every couple of hours, or an attorney, or something like that. Not so much retail where they're selling selling things, that's not what I'm interested in putting next to me.
Right,
I'm hoping
but-
for some type of professional type
But you
business
know
next
and I
door.
know, the way leases go, you're not going to control that. If you get somebody in there, you're going to take them as a tenant. It's just the nature of the beast. I'm not in favor right now of reducing the number of parking spots, not because of your business, but because of the retail.
I do know, counting the other day where we are now, we're pretty much at max capacity, and going outside and counting cars that were there with everybody there, all the patients that we can have at one time, we had 13. So that still leaves 5 open spots for what's next door. And that's when we're at full capacity, which it happens, but not often.
Right, but 2 employees could take up, then you only have 3 spots left, and there's no variation there. I mean, you're skinning it down to the last soul.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah, you missed it, but state your name and address for the records first, please.
Okay. My name is Melissa Dragon, and I was just
You may want to put that mic down just a little bit.
Okay.
there.
My question is one spot, we're here requesting 1, is that going to make a big difference in the big scheme of things? I know you're concerned about that, but we're very much aware that, you can't hear me?
No, I can hear you.
Okay, we're definitely, believe me, parking has been one of our biggest concerns, but we know we're gonna be very limited, like an attorney, like you said, an accountant, maybe where they can see 1 client at a time. So we, as responsible people, we are not, he is a by-the-book person. He is not gonna have some retail shop come open next to him, I promise you. We'll go to park down by church, by St. Luke's if we have to, I said, I'll shuttle, whatever we need to do, that's gonna be the right thing. But it just seems that for 1 spot, which is what's required, is it gonna make a big difference? So with all due respect, I just wanted to add that additional comment.
Well, it's 1 spot, but wasn't it already reduced on parking?
I don't think so, was it?
From the very beginning, it was reduced from 20 because the architects exceeded the setback rules.
Right.
All right, and
So that's
so-
all I'm saying. And I told you, and I preface this with, it's not your business. It's more the retail business that I'm concerned with. You're going to need every parking spot you have right now.
Right.
You really are.
Okay? Yes, sir.
Mr. Ballantyne, just let me get your mic on, please. All right.
I don't care about 1 parking space, but I'm really concerned when we've got a homeowners association that is opposed to this because of the drainage, and we got a letter signed by a whole bunch of homeowners, again, with concerns about the drainage. Is there nothing we can do? Is there some way we can turn this back or get some relief or some attention for the homeowners?
We are working on it right now. Code enforcement is involved, the engineering department is involved. You're welcome to contact, the drainage engineer, and I'm sure he can give you more information. However, I don't have information regarding
his
the
name?
drain. It's
The drainage engineer, who's he?
Mr. Christopher Tissue,
Tissue?
yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Brookton, let me get your mic on too. Go ahead, Mr. Brookton.
Well, we keep going back to the drainage, but we still haven't solved the problem around that 1 parking space. So, and that's what the variance is all about, is the parking. So, Helen, maybe you could kind of work with staff on the drainage and the engineering part of it. But I think our responsibility here today is to really kind of discuss and come up with some kind of solution around the 1 parking spot.
Anything else, Mr. Brookton?
No.
Let me ask you, is there any way the building could be reduced maybe 1 or 2 feet on both sides, taken away from everybody, making the building a little bit smaller, which may get you closer to that being in compliance? I know you need as much square footage
Correct.
as you want. I'm just trying to look at
Correct.
some solutions that if you know, not taking away all from one, but
Right.
from the retail, across the rear, maybe moving it up 2 feet, showing that you're willing to try to help the residents and, trying to accommodate things. And just a suggestion.
Yeah, I mean, anything, it's possible to go back to the drawing board, I guess.
If I could just bring up.
Yeah.
The process this has started going on about a year and a half ago. This hasn't been a first time. We've been to this board 3 times. It seems like every time we try to turn something in, we find out we gotta come back to y'all or come back. So, for the Dragons, it's been a very frustrating, and it has nothing to do with the board here, but had we known we needed 3 variances the first time, we would have asked for 3 variances the first time. It's just been a very laborious and very frustrating process. They've have existing leases where they've had trying to get stuff where they don't lose their business, and it's been going on and on and on. And every time we turn around, it's another 3 months, another 2 months, and it's just it's not typical process, but it's a very frustrating one. And I just want to say that on behalf of them. They're not going to complain about it, but me working for them, I can tell you it's frustrating.
I understand that, but we don't make the rules and regulations. I mean, the piece of property we zone certain things. You could put a certain size building and certain size parking. We do not make those rules. So I know you're saying you come back before us 3 times, but the rules are out there. If a certain size building, certain businesses need certain parking spots, and I say that's beyond our control. I see we got Mr. Gordon. Mr. Gordon, your light's on.
This is actually for Sean. I mean, I know you did all the calculations, but the retention pond,
Yes.
I mean, it has setbacks on the retention pond. Is it possible that the pond could be a little bigger and still be?
Right now, we can't make the pond any bigger. There's a landscape rule that's 5 foot
I know.
around the perimeter. If we can get rid of the landscape rule, then we can make the pond bigger. But
I get it, but I just want to I want that on the record. I mean,
Sure.
we could make the pond a little bit bigger here today if we wanted to. If we
Right.
could get around some of the shrubbery that's already going to be
right.
extensive down the sides. You're going to have to build a berm in the front, I believe. Isn't that still in the overlay? This isn't an overlay district?
Nope.
So the overlay starts a little further down?
There's no more overlays.
Oh, they got rid of that? Okay, my apologies.
As far as
You still have 400 trees you're going to have to plant.
Sure.
Yeah.
We had a meeting this morning, or right before this meeting with Chris Tissue, just to verify that the drainage was good. We only had one comment, and we should be able to get that addressed shortly. So we feel like we're gonna meet all the parish regs, everything's gonna be, it's had a severe scrutiny on it, so we feel pretty good about it.
Well, I don't think you'd get any objection to making the pond bigger and losing some shrubbery. I could be wrong.
Well, it would have to request another variance.
Would it be another variance or just modify? I like the ex legal on that. Could he modify his variance?
No, the variance is requested for the number of parking spaces, not for the landscape.
Right, but if
But
he-
we could consider that if he did add more of this, that it helps with the, Yep.
No.
Okay,
And Carlin,
We're only
if you
talking
wanna-
meatballs, we can't discuss the spaghetti, right?
Right. What's in front of you today is the parking spot. So if they need another variance, they'll have to come and request another variance. I'm correct,
Oh,
Helen?
Correct.
Correct? Yeah.
And I was kind of alluding to that fact. I wasn't trying to lump that into this. It was just discussion based on the parking problem.
Yeah, but a question about, a variance about the pond, that he would have to come back.
And Tom, can I answer
unfortunately,
Tom
again.
real quickly here? What happens when you go deeper, then you retain water, so you're not gaining anything. It'd just be deeper, stagnant water. The pond only holds so much and it runs out. Did I do that right, Sean? Yeah. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? I mentioned earlier about, is there a possibility of reducing a couple feet off the building, off the rear across both?
And I guess there is, we'd have to go back to, like I said, the drawing board and start over and whatever the architects and the designers have to do to make that happen.
But if I'm not mistaken, can they modify their thing, say they'll make the building footprint a little bit smaller, and then the parking, we can address, it's all in the same thing, can they modify their building footprint? They wouldn't have to come back before us if they agreed to modify their building, or making it, I'm not saying to meet, but trying to meet the requirements.
If the building footprint is reduced and it allows them to meet the minimum number, the required number of parking spaces, they're not gonna come
Well,
back
I'm not
here.
saying, let's say, just for argument's sake, they decide to just take off 2 feet, and let's say they should have took off 5 feet, but the 2 feet, we may say, hey, that's, you're trying, and we can give them that variance of the extra parking, even though you don't meet the 200 square feet, you come close to that 200 square feet.
No, but here, the request is not to reduce the building, the request is to reduce the number of parking spaces. So the board is to vote on the request. Will you allow, the reduction in number of parking spaces or not? It's not a reduction of the building size. That's not what's in front of you. And Carlin, if you would like to confirm.
I agree.
Okay. Mr. Gordon?
Gary, is this a one-story building?
Yes, sir.
I'm assuming these are preliminary plans. You don't have your final architecturals done, do you?
That should be pretty much final.
So you all, okay. Was there any thought given to making this 2-story and reducing the, to help with the,
Well, and then, but I just thought, no, one reason, because 2-story, same square footage equals same amount of parking.
yeah, but it doesn't equal the same
but
amount of
I didn't need it
footprint.
for the size of the building. I didn't need a 2-story. Just
Right.
didn't
Well,
know
I mean,
I needed 200 square feet
You
per parking spot.
you reduced your original parking spots because you wanted the building to be bigger, correct?
No, the building stayed the same size.
Oh, did it?
We reduced the parking spots because the architect said we can bring parking all the way to the property lines. He didn't leave any boundaries. So he exceeded the setback all the way to the property lines in back and on the left, and only 10 feet from the front. So then we went back and reduced it.
No, you have 10-foot setbacks on the sides on your parking,
From the
on your
original,
parking lot.
from the back, we went all the way to the property line.
The parking,
Because the original parking had parking in the back of the building and the front of the building. And that was our first, no,
yeah,
we didn't
you
do a
moved,
variance.
you
Yeah, we
moved the
did a variance.
building back and put all the parking in the front,
And
but
we
your
moved the-
your side setbacks are 10 feet.
Correct, that now, because we had a driveway on one side that had no green space in the beginning, so we fixed everything to where we just have green space on the sides and back, and all the parking's now in front.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
I get that.
Okay. And I misunderstood, I'm sorry.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Snyder, let me get your mic on. Go ahead, Mr. Snyder.
Yeah, I just want to verify, the building is still planned to be 5,400 square feet, is that correct?
Correct, yes, sir.
Okay. That's all.
So this,
Wait a minute, Mr.
got
Gordon.
18?
Let me get your mic on. Just, this thing doesn't do it automatically no more. All right, go ahead.
all right, so you won 18, and we're down to 19, and the last spot would apparently be up where your sign is, maybe? Because it's drawn with 18. You've drawn
Correct.
this with 18.
Correct.
If you had one more spot, it would just be where the sign is.
I guess so, if we could put one there. But I don't think we can put one there.
No, it's landscape rules, we can't put one up in the
We're back to the landscape rules. Thank you. I'm
we-
sorry, forgive me. So you're telling me that,
Wait a minute, let me get you.
you're telling me that you can't even do 19 feet, 19 parking spots on this site right now at all?
No, we can't.
Correct.
I misunderstood what was happening. Have you thought about car lifts? They do great.
Not yet.
Drive one under the other.
Not yet.
Do we have any other questions of the applicant? I'm going to open back up the floor. You have any other questions, Mr. Lamarche?
Not really.
Okay, I mean, if you do come forward, I'm going to give you just a chance to speak again, but
I mean, I'm kind of on their side. I mean, they need the parking, okay? And the reason I say that is because the dentist's office have to use Whitney Bank a lot. And we see patients pushing their loved ones in wheelchairs across Gates Boulevard to get to the dentist office. And that's kind of scary, especially because you got the median there and they got to go all the way down. What's that? Right, that's what I'm hoping for. I want to make sure that they get all the parking that you guys can give them, okay? I'm just worried about what the footprint and the large section of property in the 5,400 square feet, and, but I think they need the parking that they need in that one spot because of the issues we've watched over the years with the dentist's office and the orthodontist, where patients are parking at Whitney and trying to cross Gates Boulevard with all that traffic. That's a very busy intersection there. That's all.
all right, thank you. Mr. Gordon?
This is questions for staff. What is the process to work with the landscape requirement? Would that come back to us again?
Any type of variance of the, the landscaping would have to come back in front of the board. The only way they can meet the required number of parking spaces is to reduce the square footage of the building.
Or get a landscape variance?
Or come back and apply for a landscape variance.
And time frame for that would be?
They would have to submit pretty much, today for September meeting.
All right, so I'm just thinking off the top of my head here. So if they came back for a variance for landscape and where they could make the pond bigger and the space that they lost, that they're gaining with the bigger pond, they could add a parking spot. In other words, the square footage, pardon?
Or just give the variance on one parking spot. That's all we need to do.
If I could bring up a possibility, if the issue is one spot, if it becomes an issue, my clients are basically saying with their existing facility, they're not gonna have an issue with the spot. If it becomes an issue where they need one more spot, after the site's built, they could come back and then bring up a new project to build one more spot.
Okay, but before the opposition starts, the only question I have, I know what you say you're going to have now, but that doesn't control what's going to happen in the future. You decide to move out, you got 5,400 square feet of a building, could be anything that requires a lot of parking spots. And so that particular, correct me if I'm wrong, Helen, on that, if they change the use on this, they may not get the use that they want to rent this as a different type of facility, is that correct? Because they don't have the parking for it. So wouldn't be allowed, it would have to stay something similar to what they have now or something requiring less parking.
Correct.
So if it requires more parking, he cannot rent it into whatever.
Correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand that correctly. Mr. Ballantyne, I see you had the floor. Just give me a second for the mic control. And I think Mr. Gordon had a question for the opposition. Again, just a second, Mr. Ballantyne. I got your mic on.
Now, I'll bow to Mr. Gordon. He can go first because I want to make a motion.
Okay, just a second.
All right, I want to make a motion to approve the request for the reduction of one parking space. The variance request to reduce one parking space.
Okay, we got a motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Gordon, let me get your mic back on.
I'd like to hear back from Mr. Lamarche. Yeah, he did, but I'm gonna hear it again. So based on what we're discussing right now, where does that jive with you, sir?
Well, I mean, I don't want to delay them any further. They've gone through, you know, a lot to get to where they are today. But I mean, I like the ideas that you guys have come up with, where we're going, you know, with having them make the retention pond large, whatever it takes to bring the water away from, I know drainage is not part of this, but I know that the parking is. And I mean, it would be great if they could have 19, but I understand it's not possible. But I just don't want to have, you know, all these people parked in there and you're 100% capacity, and we continue to have people going across Gates, walking across Gates Boulevard trying to get to the businesses. That's all. I know that's what we're here for. Is we're here for the parking, not the drainage. So I understand that. I mean, like I said, we're not against economic development. We're not against Mr. Dragon at all. We just want people to be smart about what they're doing. That's all. That's all asking.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
And the reason I'm doing this, Tom, is because of, I mean, it's a stupid analogy, but it is spaghetti and meatballs. We're taking away a spot so that they can have more green space. Because if it wasn't for the green space, they could have that spot. You understand? They got to have that. But if they could have more pond area, that would kind of offset things, and that's all I'm looking at. So maybe that could be done in the future. That's all.
Any more discussion? We have a motion on the floor to approve the variance. Ms. Secretary, we put on the lights. Everyone, please vote with the lights.
Mr. Gordon? Motion pass.
Thank you all.
Our next case is BOA case number 2019-1549 BOA, request by an applicant and the PUD Plan Unit Development Overlay to allow for the reduction of the required front setback from 35 feet to 17 feet to allow for the construction of a single-family residence. The property is located at 4104 Marina Villa East, Slidell, Louisiana. The applicant is Rod Warren Wilhoff II. The representative is Savoy Construction, Brent Savoy.
Mr. Snyder. Mr. Snyder?
The applicant is requesting to reduce the required front setback to allow for the construction of a single-family residence. Staff comments, please.
Just a moment, sir. Do you want to pass this around, please? The applicant is requesting a reduction of the required front setback from 35 feet to 17 feet to allow for the construction of a single-family residence. Staff feels that there's no compelling reason to recommend approval of the requested variance, considering that no hardship has been demonstrated. Although the property is located in a cul-de-sac and the front property line is curved, meeting the front setback requirements of 35 feet will not prevent the construction of a single-family residence on the site. What I just distributed basically is a revised site plan, and the petitioner will confirm here that the request is now to reduce from 35 feet to 25 feet, and also the reduction,
Saying 75 feet.
No. She's got a new one coming down. I need to get a copy back of that also, Tom. No, you can look at the copy of the drawing. That's a new drawing, I think, on that.
The original request was from 35 feet to 17 feet. What I just distributed is an amended request to go from 35 feet to 25 feet. And I also sent a copy of an additional letter in support.
Okay, just a second. Wait. I got, Mr. Gordon's got the floor first. Just a second, Mr. Gordon, let me, oh, I'm sorry. Would you, the applicant say, will you please state your name and address for the records?
Yes, sir. I'm Brent Savoy with Savoy Construction from 3735 Pontchartrain Drive, Slidell, Louisiana, 70458. here representing Mr. Rod Wilhoft, the owner.
Mr. Grip, go ahead. If you're going to speak, go ahead and give us your name and address, or we have it on for the records.
Rob Wilhoft, 4096 Marinaville East, Slidell, Louisiana.
Okay. Do y'all have anything further to add?
Yes, sir. It was a typo when you originally submitted the documentation. The original request was supposed to be for 25 feet, which was a 10-foot encroachment into the front yard setback. What happened was, when we laid out the property, the adjacent landowners have built at two very distinguishedly different elevations. The neighbor on the left is up at about the same height as our yard would be in the backyard. The neighbor on the right, however, is about 3 feet lower. We are approximately 2 feet above base flood elevation in this area. So when we laid out the property and we brought in the fill, we realized that the neighbor didn't bring in enough fill in their backyard, and the elevation change from their backyard to where the back corner of our house would be about 5 feet. So we approached the issue and we brought it to the homeowners association and said, this is the issue that we have. They walked down, they looked at it, and they, without hesitation, said, why don't you move the house 10 feet forward? We said, well, that would be encroaching into the setback. And they said, not a problem. Here's our approval. They signed the site plan saying to move it forward, and they handed it to us. Here. Right here. That's, well, they literally signed, we took the site plan to them. They signed it, and they said, okay to move forward 10 feet with their initials and their signature.
Tim, it looks like you've lost the floor.
Yeah. Just a second. Mr. Gordon had the floor first, Tom, but that's all right. You can look at the plan and pass that down. Do you have anything else further to add, Mr. Savard?
We also received written letters of approval from each neighbor, identifying that they're in acceptance of this request. We have had a similar issue in the past with Grand Champions, for example, in a cul-de-sac situation where the setbacks are normally 25 feet. Well, the parish and the homeowners association has adopted a 15-foot setback in that particular cul-de-sac for this same exact issue. And that's it.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Gordon, that's all you had lights first?
What are your side setbacks, just out of curiosity?
7 feet and, I'm sorry.
It's an aggregate?
I think they're,
Is it like 15 collective?
I think they're 5 and 5.
5 and 5?
Is it on that? It should be on that page that he has in his hand. Oh, did you pass it down? Gotcha. Let's see here.
It's 10 and,
It's 4 and 5, so it's a cumulative of 9.
So these are almost like large garden homes?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, we just now, or at least I'm just now getting the letter from the HOA, which is what I put a lot of stock in, because which house is Mr. DeFata's? Joey DeFata?
That's the yellow one.
You sure you want him as a neighbor?
Here's my cousin.
Huh?
That's my cousin.
That's your cousin? All
Gotta
right.
watch what you say, Greg.
All right. Tell him I said hi.
And if I could just add one more thing, is that
Yes.
if we were to move the property back to the 35-foot setback because of the elevation change, in the back right corner of the property, we would have to build a retaining wall, just because of the elevation grade and the actual finished floor elevation of the house. If he would,
Is it Joey's house that's screwing you all up?
Yes, it is.
You see where I was going with this?
I see. All right. Mr. Ballantyne, just give me a second. Let me get your light. Your light comes on. All right, go ahead. Turned it off.
So at the 25 foot, my problem is with the front of your house sticking out too far compared to the ones on either side.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Because of the fact that this is the first house in the radius of the cul-de-sac, as you approach the street, the neighbor to the right is actually about 15 feet further forward than this house would be
Okay.
as you approached it.
So the one, as I'm looking to it, the one on the right will stick out further anyway.
That's correct.
And how big is this house? How many square feet?
2,400?
Anything else, Ms. Valentine?
I'm done.
Mr. Brookton, just give me a second, so I get your light on. Go ahead, Mr. Brookton. And then Mr.
Will
Gordon.
this 10 feet that you're requesting will bring your, the house out of the canal?
That's just the property line.
Yes, sir. That's just the property line that you're looking at
Okay.
there on the aerial photo. It's the actual house isn't in the canal.
That's it, I don't.
Just a second. This is playing with these lights. Mr. Gordon?
Yeah, I always put stock in the homeowners association because they're the ones that are responsible, and since they signed off on it, I make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve and a second. Do we have any discussion? I know, well, Ms. Valentine, I guess that you want me to clear the floor. Do we have any discussion concerning the motion? Ms. Secretary, will you put on the voting lights? Would everyone please vote with the lights?
Motion passed.
Great. Appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
That takes care of our cases for today. Old business? Tom, any old business? Tom's not listening. He needs hearing aids. Any old business?
Yes. I'm sorry.
Well, wait, let me get your mic on. Let me,
Tom, you don't save all your paperwork like I do in a stack?
go ahead, Mr. Valentine. You had something for old business?
Yes. If it please the board, could we get a checkbox? Helen? Council, could we get a checkbox that says HOA, HOA approval, or HOA, check, HOA approval, check, or comments, and just something small that, so we know going in and know it up front that, hey, that it's already gone before the HOA, and there may not be an HOA, and that's fine, but
What happened is that the letter from the HOA, if I'm not mistaken, it was, and then that's.
no, it had nothing to do with this. I'm
Okay.
talking about in general, going forward, as a matter of business, can we have something on the application that says, is there an HOA? Do they have HOA approval? Do they have approval of the adjacent homeowners? Comments?
Well, it's like in part of the packet, it says, that if I'm not mistaken, there's like, you can bring additional documents, which includes, HOA approvals or, some, in that verbiage is there.
I guess, I'm looking for something more formal and, they have to check it off whether there's HOA. If it please the board.
I mean, it's not a requirement, so that's why.
No, I'm asking, can we make it, if it please the board, can we make it a requirement?
We're not gonna add that to the application form. And Carlin, go ahead.
Yeah, the board cannot add a requirement to, that would require an ordinance change. That might require action from the council or action from the administration to change the application process.
So, Tom, when they opened the new marijuana distribution center, was it the Maui Wowie that got you? I was just curious.
All right. Do we have any other old business? Do we have any new business?
No, I ain't.
Do we have any new business? Helen?
No.
No cases for
Oh,
next?
yes, we have 4 new cases for next.
How many?
4.
4 new cases for next month. Any other new business? I move to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
One opposed. We adjourn. Thank you. Well, one adjourn. I marked it down.
Call the question.
We already called the question. Meeting's over.
Call for a vote.